So I'm here with Joani. Is it Schumaker or Shoemaker?
Maker, like a coffee maker.
Oh, I love it. Okay, so I'm here with Joani Schumaker, who is the queen of revenue management. And there has been some news this week in the Bay Area where I live and work about San Francisco Board of Supervisors voting to ban certain types of revenue management software. And this is not an area of expertise that I am deeply experienced in, and Joani is. So Joani, I would just love to hear your thoughts on the ban. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I've been watching the articles in the last year or so. I think some of them are very sensationalized and they're written by people who don't really know how we're using revenue management today. So I think it's probably really important to start there. That there are some systems that are leveraging the public data, and there are some that are leveraging private data. And that article was specifically about the ones that are using the private data, and I think that ban only applies to those. So it's kind of widely known in our industry, like who's using public versus private data. I won't mention any names on our call today, just for, don't want to ruffle any feathers. But these are discussions we have with owners and operators literally every week. They might have been using a revenue management system for the last decade, and now they're sort of reevaluating because, quite frankly, there are many more options available now, and you don't have to use just the 3 or 4 that have been available for decades. So it's an exciting time to be in revenue management. It kind of hurts my revenue management heart when I see articles like that because, pieces of them might be true, but the people who are writing those articles don't really understand how we're using it today. So there's that.
So walk me through, and this was my biggest question, the difference between public and private data.
Mm-hmm.
What is that, and how? And I mean, this may or may not be your area of expertise, but what I'm curious about is how are the regulators defining it, and how are they going to dive in and understand how it's being used? If it's, you know what I mean? Like the enforceability piece is going to be interesting, but the public and private data is something I'm really interested to understand.
Okay, so I can touch on that briefly. I'm not a data scientist, so you'd have to ask someone like Rich Hughes, or I mean, there's a couple people out there. Vidur Gupta is another one. There's a couple people who can speak to the data side of things a little better than I, but basically the difference, in essence, the difference between the public and the private data. Public is just what's publicly available on a website today, and we're talking strictly competitor data. So if you were going to call around and do a market survey, and you were going to try to go figure out what your competitors were doing for pricing today, if you can find it online and it's publicly available for anyone to find, then that's what we call public data. The private data is the data that's housed in like a property management system or some type of market survey system where they're gleaning from internal data, and that's the type of data that we don't want to be using.
So just, for somebody who maybe for whatever reason doesn't know, if I can find it on a website, cool. But if I have to pick up the phone and so pricing, probably going to be fine. If it's market pricing on a website, great. But if I call my competitor and say, hey, how many leases did you get today? Is that private data?
No, I mean, I think there is some apprehension around that. Like in the last maybe 3 to 4 months, I've heard from different operators that they're not asking those types of questions anymore. They're literally just going to the website to see what their comps are doing, or they're using a tool that has a built-in web parser that's going out and scraping the websites every day and telling us what the best price is for each one of those comps. And it's really cool because there are some revenue management systems now that have a built-in market survey tool that's going out and scraping websites and gathering the public data for us so we can see it all in one system now. I wrote a blog post on it, or a newsletter earlier this week on that, actually, that, I think when you leverage the right revenue management system, you may not even need to leverage a separate market survey tool.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, so there are some market survey tools on the market now that you can use, and they go out and have that same sort of web parser built in and scrape the data. And so, the site teams will bring that data to the pricing discussions that we're having with clients each week, and that's used to make an informed decision.
That's phenomenal. So the San Fran ban, as Justin Dilley has named it, I was like, oh, if it rhymes, it sounds a little less scary. You know, on one hand, I don't think the purpose of this call like needs to be should we not regulate. I mean, we all have our opinions about that, but in terms of that particular scenario, let's say worst case scenario, everybody follows suit and it's like, okay, all of a sudden this is banned. What you're saying is there's still great options out there. Nobody needs to drastically change how they're doing revenue management or business as long as they have the right tool.
Right, exactly. As long as it's a tool that's not using the private data, which there are many options that are not. So you've got options.
And then if folks are looking for that, is there a good way for them to discern easily who's using private and who's using public data?
Well, I think when we do demos with certain clients, like we'll join the demo and help them in their product selection in some cases. And so each of these software companies have a demo and they talk about data. So I think it's important to ask the right questions, know where the data is coming from, ask, is it public? Are you using private data? Is it semi-private? Some of them are even using government data, which I think is really sophisticated. And so it's just those types of things have changed a lot in the last year, but those are all the right questions to be asking. And it definitely comes up during their product demo.
So if we had clients or if there's folks out there that are not sure, they're not clear on what their revenue management software is or is not doing, would you and your group be a good resource for them to reach out and help navigate these waters right now?
Absolutely. We have discussions every week, but I would say they could also reach out to their software provider if they're having questions about where the data is coming from specifically. But we help them. I mean, we can talk through the different products that are available and help find the right match based on their business strategy, their type of portfolio, because it's not one size fits all. I mean, one type of software may not work for one kind of portfolio, but the other one will. And then it's just their strategy, their business strategy has a lot to do with which tool, and also whether they're leveraging a separate market survey tool or not. If they're locked into a contract with another market survey tool, then maybe they don't need the bright and shiny one that has the tool built in, or maybe you get kind of a twofer. And if you pick the right system, then you don't need the separate market survey tool. So we help with all of that.
That's awesome. I love it. Well, I'm so happy that you took time out of your busy day to chat with me and answer my questions. I know I'm not the only one that is a little murky on what's happening. And so the clarity is always super helpful. So thank you.
Yep, it's a little crazy out there.
I know. Anything else you want to add that you want to make sure that everybody knows about revenue management?
Well, I would say we're using it differently today than we were even using it a year ago. Like a year ago, people might have been looking at what the system was recommending and then accepting that system's recommended price. But now there's so much going on in each of these markets. There's not one system that really understands the nuances of what we're up against in terms of new supply and all the construction concessions that we're facing. And so I hate to say that it's a more manual approach to pricing, because it's not. Like, we're still leaning on the revenue management system, but we're having more discussion around market response, using the Goldilocks method, like what's flying off the shelves and what's not. And that helps us determine where we need to push price and maybe pull back a little bit. But there are some benefits to using revenue management, even if you're not going to use the system's recommendations for price. And people always go, well, then what's the point of using revenue management? The lease expiration is the biggest reason, because nobody wants to manage that manually. The other thing is it really does a lot for a lease up or for the sales team. It helps create that sense of urgency because they have tools like a price quote to use. And then the fact that pricing could change daily is also creating that sense of urgency in and of itself. And then when you're manually pricing, you don't have but one option and one lease term. So revenue management helps you kind of open up those options and seem more flexible with your customers. And so you can offer 3 to 15-month terms, and the price varies based on the term and move date. So those are all the benefits to using revenue management, even if you're going to set pricing and hold it for a week and not let the system do what it wants with your pricing.
I love it. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.